This is Colin O'Keefe for LXBN TV, and today we're looking at the Stock Act, which is intended to prevent insider trading by members of Congress. To discuss the act, we bring in Stefan Passantino, head of McKenna Long and Aldridge's political law team and author on the firm's pay-to-play law blog. First off, can you explain the Stock Act and the differences between the House's proposal and the Senate's proposal?
Sure. What this piece of legislation arises out of is a 60 Minutes piece that ran only just a few months ago, which was also based on a book that had been put out previously, which really highlighted the degree to which members of Congress are given access to a great deal of inside information, and that some of those members have been appearing to trade in the stock market on that same information, be it economic information, information about various products that might be coming out, or any other type of information that you and I wouldn't necessarily have access to. These members of Congress, because it's their job, do have access to it, and some of which have been trading on it. So when that 60 Minutes article piece came out just a while back and really highlighted the degree to which members of Congress not only were benefiting personally in a financial way from their knowledge, but also to some extent could not be prosecuted for inside information because by definition, information that is in the realm of Congress is public information, and therefore you can't prosecute for insider trading. Mm-hmm. When that information came out, there really was fairly bipartisan and universal public outrage over the idea that this was going on. Mm-hmm. And in very, very short order, on a roll call vote, the Senate put through and passed by an overwhelming margin a piece of legislation that would not only make much more difficult the opportunity for members of Congress to trade on information, make it much easier for them to be prosecuted. One of the highlights of the Senate piece of legislation is that there were amendments to really the criminal law that actually gets at bribery and other activities. It's called the Honest Services Act. There are amendments in there that really extend beyond traditional bribery issues to make it criminal to engage in this kind of activity. That was one significant issue beyond what was in the 60 Minutes article. The other one was the notion that anyone who gets access to what's called political intelligence, not necessarily just lobbyists, but anyone who has access to inside financial information or other information would actually have to register as a federal lobbyist and comply with all of the lobbying disclosure rules. Now that is very, very broadly drafted in the Senate version, and it can swoop up not just staff and others, but lobbyists, law firms, anyone who makes it their business to interact with members of Congress or their staff and could be perceived to get inside information. Mm-hmm. Well, once that hit the street, that in fact there was this huge new element of federal lobbying disclosure that was going to be added for anyone who possesses political intelligence, that set off a lot of alarm bells up and down K Street and also really throughout the country. The House version that then passed not long after that didn't include those two key provisions, the changes to the Criminal Honest Services Act and also this whole notion of requiring registration by members, people who have political intelligence. That's the real key difference. And what we have now is the two versions have passed in an overwhelming manner in both the Senate and the House, and now it heads to the conference committee. Where behind closed doors, those differences get worked out. We don't know how that's going to shake out yet. Ultimately, it would have to pass both houses again, and then we were going to see what happens on that. But as I noted on my blog, the one thing that the House did is they set up a special committee to examine the subject, and to me that's always code for it's dead on arrival. But that's where we are procedurally right now.
Yeah, it's interesting to watch. I really, as I mentioned, enjoyed your post. And in your post on the act, you mentioned that, quote, near universal public outrage is about the only thing, about the only catalyst for congressional action these days. And even with that, it seems the House a bit is trying to have its cake and eat its too in terms of, taking out some of the strongest measures in the Stock Act, or out of the Senate's version of the Stock Act. Does their bill, do you think, do enough to prevent members of Congress from practicing insider trading?
Well, in fairness to the House, I mean, Well, what happens when there's so few pieces of legislation that actually look like they're going to pass both houses, there tends to be, some would call it like a larding up or putting a lot of ornaments on the Christmas tree, that pieces of legislation that wouldn't ordinarily get through. There are many who would say that it's nice to start with what everyone agreed is universally the issue, which is members of Congress and their staff getting inside information and trading on it. And that was the impetus, and that was the source of all of the anger. There are many who would say that the Senate version extended well beyond that to try to create much more disclosure of the private sector in a way that might not otherwise have passed but for the fact that they were tapping into this anger over the members of Congress issue. So clearly I think that the House version accomplishes what the Senate version did with respect to the issue that stirred up all the anger. What the House did not permit to happen was for a much greater expansion of the regulation to address other issues that really don't necessarily directly relate to this issue, but have a lot more to do with what's happening with super PACs, lobbyist disclosure, people maybe having influence that is not disclosed. And so there was an effort perhaps to expand. Now that might or might not be good public policy, but the House said that that goes beyond what is the essence of what everyone was trying to accomplish. I'll leave it to others to sort of have the judgment as to which version should pass, but right now that's where we are.
I see. Yeah, that's very interesting in that this is something that was unilateral going in, so the Senate is thinking, hey, can we try to get a few extra things going in here? And then lastly, which way do you see things going? I mean, you mentioned it goes to committee after this. Do you see it being signed into law? And if it does, will it have the teeth? Will it have the ability to accomplish its goal of preventing members of Congress and their staff from trading on insider information?
Well, the first rule of Washington is never bet against inertia. That's sort of the starting point. But I would say it's very clear that there is broad bipartisan support for the core, which is the notion that members of Congress and staff should not have the opportunity to trade and make personal money off of their knowledge that they get that others would not have. I'm pretty sure that core component is going to pass. I would be much less optimistic that out of the conference committee this larger public services fraud, Honest Services Act issue is going to really come through, because that's putting more criminal exposure. And I think on members of Congress, I'm not sure they're wild about that. And I do think that this notion of requiring expanded lobbying disclosure for people who are not traditional lobbyists, I would probably bet against that passing both houses at the end of the day. But I do think you are going to see a core component of this become law and be signed by the president.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm looking forward to watching it and seeing how it progresses. Well, once again, that was Stefan Passantino of McKenna, Long & Aldridge and author on the Paid-to-Play Law blog. As I mentioned, he has a great post in the Stock Act, so be sure to check it out. It's paidtoplaylawblog.com. And, of course, for more on this, be sure to visit lxbn.lexblog.com. Thanks, Stefan.
Great. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.